Right. Well, the South African Human Rights Commission helps keep us an honest nation. They're part of observers that visit polling stations and ensure the IEC officials and party representatives follow the rule of the law. At least 3 incidents involving police have already reached oversight body Ipid, and the Electoral Commission fired an official for tampering with a ballot box in the northwest. But do we have a bigger picture? The South African Human Rights Commission Chair, Chris Nissen, joins us now for more. Commissioner Chris Nissen, thank you so much for your time. The Constitution is very clear that those with disabilities, for instance, must have decent access to voting stations. I did hear of 1 or 2 issues last night of there being no wheelchair access and issues with people who do not have sight.
Yes, indeed. Just one correction. I'm not the chairperson. I'm one of the 8 commissioners that are employed in the commission.
My apologies.
Yes, indeed. We've picked up a number of issues, and obviously our monitors investigate that, and we will be engaging the IEC on our observations and what we found. But I can say that yesterday we had a good cooperation from particularly Commissioner Love and Mr. Michael Hendricks in the province here, that when we called, they could immediately fix some of the issues, particularly where people have been finding that they in the wrong voting station and they could not access theirs, and a number of issues. But also in terms of yesterday morning was for the metro, was quite a problem with the storm that occurred here, and so there were some delays, but in our view, things went well with all the glitches and stuff that are there. We're quite happy with it, but there are some of the recommendations that go forward to the IEC.
Chris, were there any other major issues? I'm thinking of intimidation of voters and disruption at voting stations.
At the stations that we visited, and obviously we are collecting all the information this morning, there were not many disruptions, and there were maybe 1 or 2 people that were unhappy that they are in the wrong voting station, but they were quickly referred to the correct one. And intimidation, we haven't seen it, particularly in the morning, because the voter turnout in the morning was very, very slow. This is one of concern for us, that throughout the country we had a very, very low voter turnout in terms of people exercising their right to vote. And, you know, given the fact that we have so few people voting, and when I say so few, I mean, I'm saying that in terms of the previous elections, that's a concern for us, that we see a exercising of a democratic right, and obviously there are a number of reasons for that.
Chris, can you unpack that a little bit for us? Do you think it could be partly due to COVID, the short notice of the announcement date for the elections, not enough campaigning, or just absolute dissatisfaction with local services and the ward councillors?
One of the things that I observed, and remember we've been observing but also participating in previous life on the elections, was the absence of excitement at the polls, at the stations. Because normally there were, even the parties would be like making jokes or taunting each other and so on, but we saw quite a kind of almost like just people sitting and doing their own thing. But we saw a lack of excitement. And yes, you're correct, there are a number of issues that has contributed towards this low turnout. COVID is one of them, and for the first time in the pandemic that we are entering an elections. But I also do believe that the issue about socioeconomic rights, in other words, the lack of delivery, and people maybe becoming a bit weary of all the promises that people are making, all the parties are making, and people's experience about the lack of service delivery over the past few years, particularly within the local government environment. So I think it is that's maybe one of the concerns that people have, and maybe people are just saying, you know what, we vote, and each time people come with their promises, and the promises are not realized in terms of housing, water, sanitation. I mean, we still have, after 27 years of democracy, pit toilets and bucket systems in this country, and we look at some of the places which I visited across the country in the past few months, is just that sewerage are running in our streets. We see the effects of corruption where roads have been built partly, where bridges have been partly, where there are dams standing with water, but the people do not benefit from it. So yes, indeed, I think that must have been a major contributing factor.
Chris, just last question. At a voting station I was at last night, there was that lack of gees, if you like, but it was partly due to frustration at the voting machines malfunctioning and the queues having to go so slowly.
Yes, indeed. We found that some of the zip machines and also the VDMs and so on, and we've raised it with them at all the levels. Yeah, people were some of those glitches that were there. And I think one can understand that given the fact that we've been all constrained by this pandemic and clearly, that the IEC had to pull out all stops to make sure that the elections is free and fair and successful. And yes, those are some of the things that we'll discuss with the IEC going into the future.
All right. Thank you so much to election observer at the South African Human Rights Commission, Chris Nissen.